Thank you so much for tuning into today's Author Talk series brought to you by the Library Speakers Consortium. The Library Speakers Consortium is a partnership of more than 300 library systems across the United States, Canada, and New Zealand, with the goal of making Author Talks more accessible to communities of all sizes. I am Brandon Adler, your host and moderator, in conversation with each of the wonderful, best-selling, prize-winning, and highly acclaimed authors that you will hear from throughout our series. Today, we are so excited to welcome Emmy-winning television host, chef, and New York Times bestselling author, Lidia Bastianich. She's here to talk to us about her memoir, My American Dream, A Life of Love, Family, and Food. Welcome. How are you?
Hi, Brendan. Hi, everybody. A pleasure to be here.
Thank you so much. The pleasure is all ours. Before we jump in and get to all the good stuff, I do want to kind of give everybody that standard housekeeping information that keeps everything running smoothly. We have compiled some viewer questions that were pre-submitted with registration, so thank you everybody for doing that. But we will also be taking additional questions throughout the entirety of our conversation. So when you have a question for Lidia, you can click that questions button that's below this video. There are 3 tabs there. One of them says questions, and you can submit that question at any time. If you are unable to attend the full talk for any reason whatsoever, in about 24 hours, you will receive a thank you for attending email, and inside that email will be a link to the recording. Now, to formally introduce our guest for today and introduce my Italian. Lidia Bastianich is the author of 15 previous cookbooks and is the Emmy award-winning host of public television's Lidia's Kitchen, which also airs internationally. She was a judge on Junior MasterChef Italy and has appeared on Italy's highly rated daily program, La Prova del Cuoco. She is also the co-host of Nonna, Senti che fami, pensaci tu. How did I do that time?
You did well. Nonna, senti che fame, pensaci tu. You did very well, though.
Well, thank you. which airs on Disney Plus or Discovery Plus, in Italy. I watch a lot of Disney around here. Lidia owns Becco and several other acclaimed restaurants and is a partner in the acclaimed Eataly. Again, thank you so much for being here.
My pleasure, Brendan, and I'm looking forward to all the questions and connecting with your viewers, with the readers.
Yes, absolutely. And like I said, we had a lot of pre-submitted questions, so people are super excited to connect with you as well. So I guess let's just dive in.
Sure.
Let's talk about your name, Lidia, or Juliana. Maybe that's just reserved for family members. I don't know. But
let me tell you, Brenda, in my family, they still call me Juliana. My brother still calls me Juliana. And I guess that name goes back to actually the whole history of where I come from. Brendan, I was born in Istria. Istria is a small peninsula northeast of Venice. It is now part of Croatia, but it was part of Italy. And that area, Italy has 20 regions, but that area was part of a region called Friuli Venezia Giulia. And as the war had ended and that area was given in 1947, part of the Paris Peace Treaty was given to the newly formed communist Yugoslavia, of course, everything changed. The names, the language, and whatever. And I was just born in that year. And my mother sent my half sister, my aunt, to baptize me, but in secrecy at night, because in the evening, because communism was in. And she named her Juliana, because Juliana was part of the land. But my aunt was named Lidia, so she held me for baptism, puts Lidia first and Juliana second, but she didn't tell anybody. So I came home, I was Juliana for everybody. But when I went to school, they noticed, well, Lydia's first. So then I have 2 names and I love them both.
Yeah, it was such a perfect way to open your memoir. Like just the whole sneaking you out of the hospital in her bag and hoping you didn't cry, and then also sneaking a different name onto your baptism is pretty perfect. So your parents lived in the city Pula, but you spent a lot of time with your grandparents. And the first few chapters are kind of completely centering upon that and them and their farm. Is it in Busolaire?
Busolaire, right.
Busolaire.
I just came from there. I go there every year. You
Saw that on
see,
your Instagram.
yeah, it's an area, where I, as a child, home we were Italian, speaking Italian. The Yugoslavia came in, so Yugoslavian communism came in. Now, Brenda, one thing to understand, for everybody to understand, is that if you come from a border area, you're bound to speak more than one language. So at home we spoke Italian, we were Italian, but we did speak a little bit of Croatian is now, because now that area is Croatia. And
Uh-oh. One moment, everybody. It looks like we lost Lydia.
I'm a typical, do you hear me?
I can hear you, yeah.
You see me?
Yeah, let's switch us here. There we go.
Typical Italian, and I touch the keyboard with my flinging hands. So I apologize to everybody.
That's okay. Keep it exciting.
Okay. So the city now is Pula. It was Pula during Italy. And when we came communism, my mother and my father sent me and my brother in the little town next to Busolaire where Grandma lived, because there was a little bit more freedom. I could speak Italian. Grandma took me now and then to church because it was against the rules and everything was closed. And so even though I was born in Pula, my parents lived and worked in Pula, I did a lot of my growing up with Grandma on the farm in Busolaire. And I think that's so basic to who I am as a chef, and why I love to cook and appreciating all the ingredients, because in that little courtyard, and she had all the animal pens, we had goats, we had rabbits, we had pigs, we had chickens, ducks. And so, I would help Grandma feed them. I would help Grandma milk the goats. I would, in the morning, and that was breakfast. And then we would make ricotta when there was so much milk. And then, of course, there was the extension, of course, of the little farm, the garden, because in the aftermath of war, there was a scarcity of food also, and she provided the food, growing and the animals, feeding the animals and so on, for the whole family. And I was just a little helper, running after her, helping her, carrying her buckets or whatever it was. But in the interim, I really got my hands and my feet into the ground, harvested potatoes with her, peas, dried figs, harvested olives when the olive oil was made in November. I was really connected to the soil, of food, where the food comes from, and it always stayed with me. It made me the person that I am in my connection, understanding, and appreciation of food and where it comes from.
You get into such detail in your memoir about the farm and about foraging. It's almost kind of like a how-to guide. Like if I were there, I might be able to find some of these things in the way that you describe them.
Well, I think it's so important, because what I realized, I came here to the United States as a 12-year-old immigrant. So just to fast forward, when in 1956, my parents decided that we couldn't grow up there, and we literally escaped back into Italy. When we escaped back into Italy, the papers were different, our names had changed, because communism did that. They changed your name, or whatever. And so we ended up in a refugee camp. And we spent 2 years in a refugee camp. And then the Catholic Charities brought us to the United States. So I came as a young girl, 12 years old, and I got very much into the American lifestyle. I wanted to become an American as soon as I can. The freedom, America, this wonderful country. But as I grew and got into it, I realized that I had a lot of experiences that my American counterparts, my friends, and as I went on into the restaurant business and cooking, a lot of the chefs didn't understand. They never milked a goat. They never made the ricotta. And so for me, for myself, for my own feeling good, I had this memory, and I share this memory willingly to everybody that worked with me, and of course, ultimately, into a book. I needed to share what the reality of food, the simplicity of food, the appreciation of food. I think today we depend so much on big industry to feed us, but to understand how the earth gives us, this plain earth gives you food and feeds you, then you understand how to respect it and safeguard it.
That's so beautiful. Kimberly is asking, how do you remember your childhood in such exquisite detail? Did you use journals, family interviews, photos to help you?
I went back, certainly for a lot of, I spoke to a lot of people. But, Brandon, you know what it was? Because when my parents decided to migrate, we didn't know, they didn't tell us as children. So my mother, my brother, and I went to visit because, when the border went down, part of the family was left in Italy and part of it was under communist Yugoslavia then. So we went, my mother decided to take me, my brother, and her to visit relatives in Italy. Now, they wouldn't let the whole family go. They always kept one part of the family as, in a sense, as a hostage, and that was my father. So my brother and I and my mother went to Trieste, which is the city that was the big city that was in Italy on the border, and we didn't know we were not going back. And then about 2 weeks later, my father literally escaped the border, and they shot at him. The dogs were running, but he made it. And when he came to Trieste, and then I realized, that I wasn't going back. And for me, it was like I was being yanked out of a setting. And I think that I longed so much for grandma and that place that I felt comfortable and that I loved, that I just like the reels in my mind kept them playing. I kept them reliving, and hence also my cooking, my flavors. I recall the flavors of grandma and all of that in everything that I cooked from the very beginning. Those flavors, those recipes that I made, that I helped initially my mother and my aunt in Trieste cook, reminded me of grandma, brought me back to a special place. So food for me was a recall of a place, of a memory, of different. And, I remember being in bed, and even when we were in camp, in a refugee camp, very, very limited online for food and all that, I would relive all those moments. And I think that's why they're so embedded in my mind.
That makes complete sense. So you all lived in a refugee camp for 2 years before you came to America?
We did.
And so there's also, you talk about the secret police keeping an eye on your family. So what was the catalyst for that, like the catalyst for kind of emigrating to the US? Why did you leave?
Well, because when at that time, you have to think after World War II, Italy was on the wrong side, and hence the situation in Italy, the people, the economy, and everything was just falling apart. And my parents says, well, we just left communism, and here let's see if we have an opportunity to go either to the opportunities were America, Canada, Australia. We were lucky enough to have been accepted to America. That was in 1958.
So the Catholic Relief Services then kind of emerges this central figure in your book for getting you to the United States. But not only that, they did they sponsor your family? Is that what that was?
There were two arms of the there was the Pope at the time after World War II promised that the Vatican would take care of the refugees, the people that were left without homes, people that were fleeing persecution and whatever. And that was the Catholic Relief Services. So they did accept us into Italy. They sponsored the camps with the Italian government to some extent. And then the Catholic charities took on from there here in the States, and they brought us there. Yes, they did. They paid for our trips. We had nobody there. They put us, when we came to the United States, in a hotel, in a simple hotel, not unlike what's happening today. I'm just thinking at all of these refugees and what's happening to them. Well, they did. They put us in a hotel, and we had a social worker, and slowly they looked for an apartment and for a job for my father, and an Italian community where we would feel at home. And first it was New Jersey, and then we moved to Astoria, and our life started like that. My father was a mechanic. My mother was a school teacher, but of course she didn't speak English. So she, all girls in Italy at some point learn how to sew a little bit, and so she worked in a factory as a seamstress, and we began our life, and that's how our life in America began, slowly building and growing, and the opportunity of going to school for me, for my brother, and hence ultimately, look where I am today, the opportunity that I was given. And, I always say, it's not just given to you. You have to appreciate it, understand it, become part of it, work for it, and then at the end, be grateful for it and return some of the gifts that you were given. And that's exactly how I feel.
Words to live by, ladies and gentlemen. Tracy is saying you must have had incredibly mixed emotions when first arriving to the United States. Maybe scared, happy, excited. What was that like?
It was mixed emotion, but there was one of happiness.
Yeah.
America is great. It's freedom. You can speak whatever you want, the language that you want. You can go to church, and being confined by communism, because my evolution happened to some extent under communism, and then being in the camp and all of that. Finally, we're going to have a home where I could be free, that we could, that I could be who I am in a sense, but really become an American, this opportunity that this great country had. Because, even in those times, America is America. It's always the greatest country on this earth.
So your food world must have also changed pretty drastically then. Were you able to grow any sort of fresh vegetables inside?
No. Well, that's part of why, then I sort of revert to all these memories, and ultimately, making sure that looking for this authentic, organic, and so on. But initially, let me tell you, I was mesmerized by Twinkies, doodles, Jello, and I had never had Jello. So it was a whole world. Peanut butter and jelly, never had. I still love it. So it was a discovery first of a new culture, and learning a new language, and becoming part of this culture as a teenager. It was Elvis Presley time. I know I wanted my bobby socks. I wanted, the skirt that whatever that would twirl around. I wanted all those things. I wanted everything that I wanted to become American as soon as possible.
That makes sense, especially as a preteen trying to assimilate to a new country.
Exactly. And then, of course, at home, my father and my mother had a little bit more. They were so. Being who we were at home, we were Italian. We were cooking and eating and talking Italian. But out there, I wanted to be an American. So this dichotomy in my life, but it made me richer, And I think all the experiences in life, sometimes I also get asked, Lidia, being in camp like that, how does it feel? Does it make you bitter or whatever? In retrospect, it didn't. It was hard at the time. But it made me understand situations that humans get caught in or are, and how to use that as a strength, as a springboard for something if you're given the chance. Some people were never given the chance, and they, those experiences made me stronger and richer and more understanding.
Mm-hmm. Gina is asking, you mentioned missing your grandmother when you moved to the U.S. Did you get to see her again? When was the next time you got to go back?
10 years after I went back, and I got to see her.
That's good.
And she also got to see my children, my husband, And so she that, and as I said, I go yearly back. We are in Friuli, Venezia Giulia, which is Italy, and we have a home, and we have our winery, the Bastianich winery. We go there all the time, but we cross the border. Now Croatia became part of the EU, so it's easier. But we cross the border and we go into Croatia, and there I go to my grandma's house, and it's still the courtyard that I remember as a child, and after she passed and all that, it was somewhat left in abandon, in sort of. We just fixed it, but I wanted it to be as the same as I remembered it. So I never did any major modernification to that courtyard. I go, as I said 2 days ago, I came back from it. It's still the courtyard where I was with grandma, where the chickens would run around. There's no chickens now. But I have to share with you. There's the courtyard and the house and the pen was right before a pine forest, pine woods, and it was beautiful because the sound of the wind through the pines, the smell of the pine. But as a child, I remember at night, in the pens where you have animals and all of that, you feed the animals. There's also mice and so on. So there was owls. There was an owl, and I remember as a child, and this owl would hoot at night. And as a child, I would be afraid, Now when I go back, the owls still hoot. And I say, you must be the grandchild of the owl that I left behind. So it really brings me back to a special place, that whole setting. And it gives me a sense of, whence I came from and where I've gone, and how the two worlds could really meet.
Mm-hmm. And it must be a very enriching feeling to share the space that you remember as you remember it with your children and your grandchildren.
Absolutely. I brought my children there. I bring my grandchildren there, and I tell them the story. I took them to the camp, to the place, the room where we were, and they need to know all of this. They need to know that's part of history, and it's part of their family history. And, they need to understand and be grateful for the opportunities that their grandparents, their parents, us were given so that they could live better.
Mm-hmm. That's wonderful. That's good. So let's kind of move on. We're getting some questions about your first restaurant in Queens that you opened with your husband. And Anthony would like to know, how did your mother influence your career as a chef and a restaurant owner, especially there in the beginning?
Well, my mother, she was not a great chef, but she was a good cook. She cooked all the basics and everything. So when we came here, and as I said, she ended up working as a seamstress, and she would work overtime. So she would put all the basics. She would do the mise en place, as we call it, for me. Left all of that, and the beans to soak, whatever I was cooking, and she would kind of tutor me, and then even leave a little message. Now you put this. Now you put that, and the meal was almost cooked by the time she came home. She finished it. So in that way, I had, whether it was go shopping, buy, clean, do the vegetables or whatever, I was involved in cooking. Continued somewhat with my mother in the cooking elements of the home cooking. And once we opened the restaurant, so I loved cooking. I guess I'm good at it because it works.
Well,
Yeah, and it gives me great satisfaction to nurture, to give food to somebody, because I, as a child at 10 years old, I was in line with my little plate for food, and so maybe I realized what it is not to have food, and for me to be able to nurture and feed people, and in turn have this appreciation that they love what I cook. It just feels great, like a musician playing great music and people clapped at you because you did a great job. So somewhat, it's parallel to that for me, the satisfaction that it gives me to cook for others. But when we opened our first restaurant, now my husband, who also was an immigrant from the same area, worked in the restaurant. So he wanted to open the restaurant. I was not a chef then. And So I said, okay, you open the restaurant, I will help you what I know. But we hired a chef, and I got in the kitchen with the chef. The chef was an Italian American chef, so the food was Italian American. It was not the regional food that I ended up cooking on in my life. But my mother would come also. We would make the gnocchi, we would make the garganelli, the homemade pasta, and all of that with this Italian American chef. And slowly I realized that people really like this kind of regional food. And I get involved ever more. And the first 10 years of my career in restaurant business, I actually was the sous chef with this chef in the kitchen, and ever more cooking the food of that I remember, the food of my region. And then, of course, going back to Italy to learn ever more, because Italy has 20 regions and there's a lot of recipes to learn.
All of the restaurants that you have opened, um, have you been the head chef, or did you kind of stay?
Oh yeah. Once the first 10 years, I became his sous chef, and then we opened another one. So I kind of went back and forth between one and the other. Then we sold those, which were in Queens, and we opened for Lidia in New York, and there I became the chef. And that was so. The first restaurant was in 1971. For Lidia we opened in 1981, and there I became the chef, and I sort of decided that the Italian American food is great food. Is the food of the Italian immigrants coming to America and adapting their recipes and their style to the ingredients that they found, because they didn't have prosciutto, they didn't have olive oil, they didn't have grana padano. So they adapted, and a new cuisine was born, which is the Italian American cuisine, venerable cuisine, good, delicious. But Italy has 20 regions, and the Italian regional cuisine, for those that have traveled to Italy, realize is different than what Italian American food is here in America. So when I opened in 81 for Lidia, I became the chef, and that was the cuisine, the regional cuisine of Italy. Mm-hmm. And I began cooking, which was polenta, which was gnocchi, which was risotto, all common dishes at home for us. But in the restaurants at that time in America, there were new dishes.
Mm-hmm. This is exactly why I scheduled your talk for the evening, so that I can leave and go eat something wonderful, because I'm going to be starving by the time we're done talking. So David is saying, we ate at Lidia many times over the years. Knowing that you are from Istria, David is interested in cross influences of Slovenia and Croatia on Italian cooking, on your cooking in particular, and whether this kind of reflected in your restaurant menus.
But I mean, it's inevitable. We speak the languages. I mean, I speak 5 languages, but I was Italian and Croatian, Yugoslavian, of course, and so on. Then a little bit of German also, because in that area, it was Austria-Hungarian ruled in that area also for quite a few years. So there's the leftover, even in the food, like I cook palatschinke, I make strudels, I make spetzels. These are, more Austrian, Germanic kind of. I cook with sauerkraut. That's very Slavic, whether it's Slovenian, Croatian, stuffed peppers. Sarme are stuffed cabbage leaf. Actually, the name sarme is a Turkish name, so it came from all the way the Balkans, all the way up. So absolutely, the borders of a country are very much influencing language, in custom, and the cuisine. I mean, if you look at Italy as a whole, you can tell more or less the history of Italy through the cuisines. I mean, go to Piedmont, very French. They were under the French Napoleonic and so for a while. Sicily, the Moors, the Spaniards, you have couscous, you have, so absolutely being on a region, on the border, influences you very much. It influences you in many ways, and I think in a good way, because, as I say, you speak different languages, you taste different foods, and as a human being, it leaves you open more to acceptance. Because in Istria, even though it was Italy, they were Hungarian immigrants that were speaking. They were from Czech and Slavic influence, Germanic. We lived as a child. That city was, was mixed, and it kind of makes you accept different people more readily.
So we have a lot of people asking about your time in the restaurant industry as a female chef, especially very early on when there weren't many women chefs when you became a chef. And Alyssa would like to know, how did you navigate this male-dominated restaurant industry as a woman? I think one thing is you owned the restaurant, so that was good.
Exactly. And I had my husband with me. But you know what, and I get asked this often. And I began to realize ever more once I sort of evolved in my position, and how other women didn't have maybe the same opportunity, or were not as respected in the industry. But what I can remember in Italy, women were always in the kitchen. So I didn't feel that I didn't belong. Actually, I felt I belonged in the kitchen. Even if you go into restaurants today, changed, but the male was usually outside, the host, and the woman was in the kitchen cooking. That's all I can remember. So I had that as a base. I had my family, but I think what's important for women is I never consider my gender as a major factor in achieving what I did. I always felt that you need to be a professional. You need to be good at what you do. You need to invest in yourself and learn and be the best that you can be, and go out there and do it. Because when you have that strength of knowledge, of knowing, of feeling self-confident, then you're bound to kind of resist a possible pushback or whatever more. So
kind of demand respect more.
Yeah. So I always say that to the women chefs out there: don't look yourself as a woman chef. Look at yourself as a professional. Invest in yourself, prepare yourself, and go out and do it. And be mindful and be even forceful about your position. Don't accept any BS.
I like that advice. So you are a best-selling author, a restaurateur, but you're also an Emmy-winning television host. So can you tell us about your journey to becoming a TV chef? How did this all happen?
Let me tell you, my life is wonderful. Life. A lot of people, again, how do you do this? It's a question. Life is a journey. Mm-hmm. It's a journey with many different roads that open up to you, and it's a question of feeling confident, being prepared, and taking the journey that you feel that you are best relating to, that you would like to do. And for me, that was a choice in life. But and sometimes just moments happen that you have to grab the moment, if you will. So when we opened for Lidia and I became the chef, a lot of journalists were, who is this woman, this Italian woman chef, young woman cooking this different Italian food? So a lot of people in the industry came. And soon after, Julia Child and James Beard walked in, and they made reservation. They came in and had dinner. And she wanted a risotto. We were making risotto. That's one of the dishes that was not so common in the Italian-American cuisine. And I remember it was mushroom risotto. She had it. She loved it. She came back again, and she wanted to go in the kitchen and see how it is made. And she says, Lidia, will you teach me how to make risotto? And I says, of course. And so she came over to my house. We had dinner. I taught her, I gave her a lesson in risotto. And she asked me if I would come on her. She was doing the MasterChef series then. And we did 2 episodes. And, for me, I was comfortable. I was comfortable in what I was doing. And I guess I was a storyteller, a teacher. My mother was a teacher. I wanted to share. And the producer says, Lidia, you're pretty good. You should have a show on your own. And she encouraged me. Julia Child encouraged me. And I am on PBS like Julia was from the beginning, and I love being there. And that's my story of television. 25 years later, it is 25 years now that I am on PBS.
That's incredible. That's an incredible story. I remember reading an interview that you gave, and you have another kind of celebrity connection with Christopher Walken.
Oh, yes, yes, yes. The opportunity, the restaurants offers you a lot of opportunities of meeting. So when we were in Astoria, and I was 14 years old, I was in junior high school, and across the street from where we lived, there was Walken's Bakery, and they had delicious. A German immigrant and his wife, she was Scottish, and they had the delicious bread they made and cakes. And so, being an immigrant and a worker and whatever, I went. I was 14. They only hired at 16, but I lied because I was always a big girl. And I said, if you Friday, I can work Friday, Saturdays, and Sunday when there's no school. Anything that I can do could help you. I would love to have a job. And he took me. He saw that, okay, so this girl means what she says. And that's where I began. And I began by folding boxes first, but soon enough, I got my hands into the dough, as they say. I was in the back, making the cakes, helping the bakers. And sometimes, like on Sunday, they were all gone, and somebody would come in. Oh, I need a birthday cake. I would kind of finish it off, write on it, and all of that. And Christopher Walken, and he had two brothers, Glenn and Ken, and they all would work on weekends. As delivery, they would deliver the wedding cakes, and we were friends. We became friends. We still are friends. I'm going to see him next week.
That's pretty cool. Okay, so Alexander, to kind of close up the memoir, Alexander is asking if there were 3 of your absolute favorite memories you could share with us, how would you share them? A dish, colors, textual depiction, any experience, or maybe a word or a phrase, and what would these memories be?
There's a lot of memories that made me who I am. I must say, Grandma, and the tenderness of this woman that worked so hard, and my grandfather too. But for a woman, I remember her feet. The earth there is a red earth, and I remember she would go with her bare feet in the earth with the hoe to kind of collect the potatoes when they were ripe. And I would go in back of her with my little. She would give me a little basket. She would get the big potatoes because potatoes is a root, a tuber, and it grows on the roots of this plant. And the little potatoes, when you pull up the plant, are left in the dirt. So I would collect these little potatoes, put them in this little basket, and the potatoes, when I took them, they were warm in my hands, and the earth was warm. And usually Grandma would do this as the sunset was going down, not in the middle of the day. I don't know, I don't know what to share. I can share so many wonderful emotions. That's why you say you remember all this in the book. I do. I remember them all, and it was good. I used to love my grandmother had gray hair, long gray hair. At night, I would brush her hair, comb her hair, and she would have the braids. I would braid them for her. I don't know. I can tell you 1,001 beautiful things.
Those are both beautiful things. Joycelyn is saying, so what is your favorite dish then that brings back those memories of your childhood?
I think, it's seasonally, but the flavors, gnocchi, the flavor of rosemary, of bay leaves. And those of you who watch me know that I love using rosemary and bay leaves because those are the things that bring those flavors. So if you have a chicken, Grandma would make chicken and potatoes, a whole chicken. She would get it from the coop, and we would have to pluck it and all of that. I did all of that with her, and then chicken and potato with rosemary is one of the favorites. And my mother cooked it, and my kids loved it, and my grandkids love it. So that dish transcends 4 generations. And gnocchi is another one. Gnocchi with a sauce, well, a meat sauce of some sort, whether it's chicken wing or necks or secondary cuts of meat. And the gnocchi, I made them with my kids, who made them with my grandkids, and still they love it. When they come and say, Noni, I'm going to make some gnocchis, I says, of course.
Of course. So you have a new cookbook coming out at the end of the month. Lydia's From Our Family Table to Yours. It has more than 100 recipes made with love for all occasions, a cookbook.
Yes.
What is different about this new cookbook?
My mother, we lived together. We came here as immigrants, and then when I started the restaurant, she helped me, and then I had my children, and so we moved. We always lived in the same house. We had different apartments, but in the same house. And she until she took care of us, and towards the end, we all took care of her. And I told my children, I think, that's so important for children to learn to respect their elders, their grandparents. I says to my children, I says, we have to take care of grandma, and so we did. And grandma passed away 2 years ago at 100, and we miss her so. But she would come, being in the house, she would be in all of my books, in the restaurants, she would be on my show, just because the show was taped in my house. So she was in my house, so she would come, taste grandma, whatever. She would give her comments. She was a feisty, a very opinionated individual. She loved company. She loved seeing her children succeed and move on. So she was all supportive. And so this book, Our Family Tables, From Our Family Table to Yours, it's almost like including her in the family, because the viewers, the readers out there, have been following my family, the growth of my grandchildren. They know them. They say, "Oh, I can't believe Lorenzo is so big. Oh, I can't believe Julia is such a beautiful lady," and so on. And so this book actually collects all of our family's favorites and puts them together, because we do get asked that. What did grandma like? What did Lorenzo like? What does Miles like? And so this is that kind of a book.
It's like a full family book from beginning to
collection of some of our favorites.
Yeah. Stephanie is saying, what's your advice about teaching your children about cooking? I'm watching this with my 16-year-old daughter and want to teach her as much as I can.
You have to keep her by you. You have to keep her by you, whether you go shopping for food, make plans with her about a menu, keep her in the kitchen. That's the way she would learn, hands-on, and I think you have to instill in her the pleasure of cooking. When she does something and she cooks and it's good and the family loves it, make sure that she knows that she has done something special for her family, because indeed it is something very special if you cook something and a person ingests that, takes that into themselves as a nourishment for their well-being. That's very meaningful. At least to me it is. It's very meaningful that in cooking you nurture that person or whoever is at your table, just like as a mother nurtures a newly born with milk and then so on.
And that nurturing is kind of woven throughout your new cookbook, From Our Family Table to Yours. The stories and recipes throughout the book, they're so full of love.
Exactly.
Alan's wondering, why is food such a universal catalyst in facilitating kind of cross-cultural exchange and fostering these deep relationships?
Well, I think, I'm of the thing that there should be at the United Nations food diplomacy. I think if we would eat each other's food at the table together, we would better understand and be more open to each other. You see, food is the basic. As animals, when we as animals We need food to grow and to nurture.
Mm-hmm.
But as we evolve, when we sit down to eat, our defenses to eat well are down. We are not resenting you. In order to enjoy food and to eat food, your kind of premeditated situation, whether it's anger, whether it's hate, whether it's whatever, need to go away. You need to be in a natural, relaxed state to eat food, to enjoy it, and so the food will nurture you well. When that happens, your defenses are down. So at the table is so special because you are at the table, but you're not there to argue, you're there to nurture, although sometimes Italians argue at the table. But why do we have business meetings at tables, eating with your whomever you want to do business? Why are proposals over food, over table? All of these sort of sentimental or relationship are with food, because food does that to us. In order for us to ingest it, to take it in, we need to release our tensions. We need to our almost our animal instincts take over. We need to eat and feed ourselves, and so it is. A table is a very special place. Family should eat together because of that. Because when you eat together as a family, things come out at the table that you talk, your defenses are down, and you can tell to children things that, if you put them on a chair and says, okay, we're going to talk about drugs, we're going to talk about that, their defenses go up and they are stiff. But at the table, a lot of things can come out at the table and be discussed as a family, and it permeates these young minds in what you're saying. So, table is very important. Eating together as a family at the table is extremely important.
That's brilliant. It just makes me think, it gives me advice for the future for my 3-year-old.
You have a 3-year-old, right? You tell me.
Yes.
What you do with her, make sure that her senses are tuned in. Like I was talking about the rosemary and the bay leaves. Mm-hmm. So make sure that she smells everything, because she's recording. She's at the time that she's taking in and recording. Mm-hmm. So what I did with my children, and I also work with autistic children. I do this. You take one herb at a time. You take basil, you wrap it in your hand, and then you put them at their nose, and they will smell. They will collect that, and they will file that away in their memory. So make sure that when you're cooking something or whatever, that they smell it. Do you smell broccoli? It's sulfur. It's not that's sulfuric, but that's how they begin to kind of begin a friendship with the broccoli. They smelled it, they know it belongs in the house, and slowly, eventually, they begin to eat all of these things. So make sure that she tastes everything, that she smells everything, bring it to her olfactory system and talk to her about it.
I can tell you what she says to broccoli when she smells that. Ooh, broccoli, yucky.
It's okay, mommy loves it. Yeah. And you continue. Eventually she will. But try rubbing some of the herbs separately, not all together, because she can register that one thing at the time, and she puts it away. It's in her library for the rest of her life. I recall that rosemary, that bay leaf that grandma had. I still recall it.
That's good. The olfactories, those senses are incredibly important.
The olfactory is a big source of collecting information for us in our memory and putting it in our memory bank. I mean, I'm sure you had the experience that you enter someplace and there's an odor that brings you to a special place, right? The smell, the aroma, mm-hmm. And that's the olfactory memory acting up.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. You've also kind of written a history of your life a couple of times over, though. I would say this new cookbook is kind of a new sort of memoir, just through food.
Well, yeah, I think all my recipes and all of that have a story, whether it is a story of childhood, growing up, grandma, or whether it is new experiences, because I travel to Italy continuously,
Right.
and I pick up always something new, something that's out of my area, whatever, and so the books reflect that, and I share that, and sometimes I make amendments. I do not invent recipes. Mine recipes are all based in the culinary tradition of Italy. So, I don't pretend to be an inventor. That's another chef's, you know, the chefs. But I am a conduit for a culture. And, I stay true to that as much as I can, given the evolution of our nutritional and whatever system and whatever. And of course, of mixing of cultures now, because everything is more available. Ginger, we don't use a lot ginger. Venice used it because Venice was the big city state that was a spice trader. So they use some ginger, but we don't. But I do. Now I sneak in, now and then I sneak in some ginger. But I tell the viewer when I do, because I choose to, because I like it. But I tell them that it is kind of an addendum.
Mhm. Well, Dean wants to know, what do you do for enjoyment when you're not cooking?
Oh, love to travel. I love to sail. Love the sea. I love classical music. Love to go to concert ballets. I love all kinds of music. Love to dance. Oh, there's a lot of things that I love to do. Uh, what else? Oh, I love a good chess game now and then.
Do you listen to music while you're cooking?
I do. But you see, I choose. It kind of has to be a melodic background music, because if I put any opera or something, when I begin to focus on that, and I get nervous, because do I focus on the music? Do I focus on the food? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
have to be selective about my music when I cook. Kind of a
You can't like the song too much.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Andrew has a really good question, and I know that you have an amazing answer. But Andrew would like to know, how has cooking helped you to make positive change in the world and in your community?
Well, absolutely. You can permeate cooking with cooking almost anything. As I said, a lot was given to me by the world, and I feel that certainly it's not mine to keep. I need to share it. So I do work with autistic children, cooking with them in a sense. These sensory smells, tactile is very important with them also. I do a lot of fundraising for the immigrants. United Nations just did dinners to do with the Jesuit community to build schools for children immigrant. Like I was in camp, on the average lose 2 years of school being in the camp, because the schools are not properly. So building the school is very important. I do that. So there is communities, the children cancer for children. What a chef can do, what I can do best, is I certainly cannot go and work in the hospitals or whatever, although I do with elder people, talk to them and bring them food and that. But what I do, and I do often, is that I cook meals, events, and they put me up for auction. Lydia will cook a meal for 10 of you. And I just came back from San Francisco for the farmers with the drought and all that in San Francisco, in the Napa and Sonoma area. They put me up for auction. I drew $40,000 they paid to have me cook into their home, and I went into the home of this family. They were kind enough, and that went to that. So me generating a situation that generates money by being there for the cause that I believe in, of course, then ultimately also donating to the causes, whether it's the Catholic charities that help me regularly, St. Jude's Hospital, all of those, and that I give physically.
And you have Lidia Celebrates America.
Lydia Celebrates America is a 1 hour special that I've been doing now for 13 years, and it's on PBS, and it's my one way of sort of exploring America as an immigrant and saying thank you. And we did this year's, and if they go on the PBS site and they look for Lydia Celebrates America, they will have an option to pull this up. It's a 1 hour special. We did it on different immigrants. And I felt that we did it with the Cuban immigrants in Louisville. We did it with the Nepal immigrants up in Ohio. We did it with an Ukrainian family. And with them, ultimately, how do they, being an immigrant, how did it affect them? How did their family? Some of them were new immigrants. Ultimately, in every case, I end up cooking something, like with the Ukrainian immigrants, we cooked, they taught me how to cook borscht and so on. So it was about the settling of immigrants, today's immigrants in America, how Americans are reacting. And there's, organization, U.S. America, Us America, that actually pairs families that take in immigrant families, that they have maybe an extra room or two or whatever. It's amazing that there's a lot of Americans really involved. We hear a lot of this big cities and busing and all of that. But there's a lot of American families out there that are really getting involved and helping what they can, one family at a time. And so Lydia Celebrates America, and my latest this year was it aired, when did it air? Oh, in October. It's about these new immigrants.
Great, lots of great things. So Christine and several other people honestly have said that they need to know who your favorite chef is.
I think I don't have one favorite chef. There's a lot of talented chefs out there. I am very curious about different cuisines, so I'm discovering now Korean cuisine. I love Thai cuisine. That's one of my favorites. I love Chinese cuisine. So going in the ethnic part of the cities, when I go and whatever, I look out for these kind of cuisine, and I'm just beginning to get into the Indian cuisine. I traveled to India because I wanted to see and learn and whatever. And it's a very interesting culture with a very interesting culinary, all the spices and everything. I just can't begin to even put together the spices that they put together. So is there one chef? No, there's quite a few great chefs out there, young chefs. And it's a profession that gives you satisfaction. It's a profession that you really need to work harder. So anybody, when the young people come and ask me, I said, invest in yourself, get a good education, an overall education, then get your hands dirty and go and work. It's almost like in the old masters, the painters and whatever, they all had the school of Michelangelo, the school of. And so I encourage young chefs to go to the school of whatever chef or cuisine they decide they like, and not to stay with one, to move around so that they can assimilate a lot of different styles and techniques and so on.
That's excellent advice. One last question. If you could write a letter to your much younger self, what advice or suggestions would you give?
Oh my goodness. Oh, there's so many. Where do I begin? There's a lot of. I think, what would I I don't know. I don't, there's a lot of things that I maybe would have done differently. But when the outcome is is good in retrospect, why would I want to change anything? Would I, you can't have everything perfect in life. You have to take the ups with the downs. The hard times give you more strength. Use them as constructive. That's important to know, that when you come at sort of, you think it's the end of the road, it's not. Don't give up. Use that to strengthen yourself. Give yourself courage. Surround yourself with people that will give you courage. Ask for help. I think get rid of negative senses. Get rid of anger. Get rid of jealousy. Get rid of those are the elements you do not want to harbor in yourself.
And by all means, come to the table having gotten rid of it all.
Yes, at the table you will kind of neutralize and resolve a lot of problems.
Thank you so much, Lidia. Thank you so much for joining us today, for sharing your life with us over the last several years. Thank you.
Thank you for having me. Thank you all out there for listening, and enjoy cooking.
I also want to send a huge thank you to the viewers as well for tuning in to support our Author Talk series. Without your support, none of this would be possible, and we thank you for choosing to spend your time with us. Below the live stream video, you can find a link to Lidia's books, both for My American Dream and a pre-order link to her new cookbook due out later this month. We look forward to seeing you all on September 20th when we talk to NYU professor and New York Times bestselling author Adam Alter, and again on September 27th when we chat with international bestselling author Amor Tolls. You can register for these and lots of other great events on your library's event page. I'm Brandon Adler. Have a good evening.
Ciao.